Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Epic Mind Visions. Today, I have an amazing person, Liv Olivia Pavlov. She has a master's in psychology, a Reiki master, 5 years or more of experience practicing Tantra as a Tantra teacher. She's trained with ISTA, the International School of Temple Arts, and the School of Womenly Arts. She has a wealth of experience and knowledge in using her energy to basically manifest and transmute anything in your system, in your life, and creating the life that you want for yourself. This is work that I love to dive into, and I just can't wait to hear more about Liv's experience and how she shows up in the world for everyone around her. Liv, if you can fill in the blanks on any of that intro, I'd appreciate it. But welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Jeff. It's such a joy. I'll share this is my first venture into the world, I would say, after having given birth just over a month ago. So this is my first thing I'm doing as a mama. So it's nice to re-meet you. I've already seen you, but and nice to meet the world newly as a mama. And yeah, I would say I call myself a Dakini and a sex and intimacy coach to make it easy for people who are like, "What do you do?" So hopefully we can delve into what that means. But you covered it. Other than that, and
Awesome. Well, congratulations on the birth of your beautiful child. Healthy, happy. You have that motherly, womanly glow about you. It's just oozing everything that I love about the feminine and the divine feminine, and you embody that so greatly. I really, really appreciate you and the way that you show up. So, yeah. Well, if you want to expand on that introduction a little bit and how you describe the work that you do, maybe that's a good place to lay the foundation here.
yeah. I'll also share a little bit of my story. I think it'll give some context. So, I say that I'm living my Plan C life. Like there's Plan A
Right.
and B, and now I'm on Plan C. And so I started out, in my education and my career, I was a data analyst and had this background in clinical psychology and cognitive psychology. And I found that that world was really dry. And I was sitting in my office as a professor and a grad student. And I just had this feeling deep in my heart like I need to be in the world with people doing something that's hands on and that makes a difference for people. And I had no idea what that was. And so I had the courage and the crazy to set out on a real time of seeking and following wherever I was drawn. And through beautiful turns of life and turns of fate, I met people that worked in this field of sacred sexuality and transformational sexuality work. And it just made so much sense to me because I had felt like in the clinical world, our life force, like the vibrancy of life, was just
Yeah.
left out, and it
Right.
was like, okay, how many, responses per minute is this person doing? And this idea that people were like computers just didn't work for me. I'm like, no, we're more like a tree, like humans are organic. And I had this fascination since I was small of what are people and what are we? How do we work? And then in my own life, like how do I really love being a human? How do I love life? And that spark, that naturalness that makes life interesting is what I found matters. And I would call that our life force energy. And that's also our sexual energy, that creative power. And so, especially having just, given birth and literally created life that feels truer than ever, but most of the time we're not spending time making a human being, right? Even if we have a
Right.
kid, you only have 9 months or 10 months or hopefully not 11 months of time
Right.
for people in male body, like one moment, right, where you're putting your energy into this life getting created. Most of the time, we're creating our own life. right? Our own being, ourselves, the world around us. And I find that this link of our sexual energy helps us create the world around us, have the kind of life that we can enjoy, help me go from feeling like a zombie basically in my office of grad school to living this really interesting, magical life where I can wake up and actually look forward to what's coming that day. So I
That's amazing.
that's what I want to share with people in the world, and that's, where my soul shine comes through. Mhm.
Yeah, I can feel that in the way that you speak about it. And wow, that's kind of a reality check when you were talking about like how many tasks per minute or however you phrase that. It's like, oh man, as I'm redoing my calendars and trying to like bring them all together into one place so I know exactly where all my tasks are and how much of that I need to get done on any given day or at any given time and what the deadlines are and all of that. So I know it is a challenge to live this sort of duality where as for me, somebody who's gone through some form of spiritual awakening and done a fair amount of personal development work and have some level of awareness, it's like I do feel this kind of duality where I'm showing up in the material world in the work that I do and the way that I'm able to create in that world, and then this other less tangible, more magical, more mystical, more multidimensional side of my intuition and following those paths and that life force energy and allowing it to express and create in every moment in ways that are less they're less I guess calculable of
Mhm.
what the result is. But
Mhm.
I know for me that I couldn't have one without the other. There's no way I could be doing what I'm doing in the material business world if I didn't have the connection that I have on the other side of it. So it seems like you've kind of pulled those things together in a way that you're able to articulate it, you're able to um, I guess guide others in how to live that sort of lifestyle and how to pull from both of those sides and to make the most of it, if you will, or create at the highest level possible for any being. Am I right about that?
Yeah, thank you for presencing that. So much of the time of our life we're spending taking care of life, right? Taking care of the to-do list, grocery shopping, cleaning the floor, coming up with business ideas, or showing up to a job, right? For a lot of people, probably people that are going to listen to this, and um, I would say a couple of things about that. The way that my life has become centered around this, I don't know, for lack of a better word, I would say like this soul passion I have of helping people awaken their sexual energy and their creative potential, right? It's like my
Hmm.
life is a very much an outlier, and
Right.
so I also don't ever approach my work with clients or my classes or anything of like, this is how to become how I am, right? It's more about how to enjoy your life and how to identify what you even want, right? It's like, and I would say the question that matters in this is like, how do I want to feel while I'm doing that to-do list, while I'm cleaning the floors, while I'm going to the grocery?
Right.
Do I
Right.
want to actually enjoy that? I think most of us do.
Absolutely.
I want to feel good. Do I want to feel healthy? Or do I want to just get through the list, right? Because if we relate to life like, well, if I just get the stuff done, then I can do whatever I want to do or be how I want to be. It's like that's actually totally unrealistic. But
Right.
we can impact how we feel in our everyday reality. And I think a missing ingredient for a lot of us is, what do I need to do to feel alive? Like my one of my teachers, Mama Gina, calls it feeling turned on. And people
Hmm.
hear that sometimes and they're like, what, I want to walk around with a heart on all day, or
Yeah.
what,
Right.
I'm just
Right.
gonna be dripping in my pants. Like it's not that kind of turn on. It's like
Right.
I'm off and I'm dead and I'm like, "Bleh," or I'm on, like I'm
Right.
here. And
You're
the
present and
the
centered. Yeah.
yeah,
There's a presence, and it's what was I gonna say? It's more of a just that energy being present in you without, like you say, having it be expressed in a purely sexual way, which is what most of us are used to because we're not tapped in or tuned into the more subtle versions of that, or at, accessing it in a more subtle way, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
absolutely. Yeah, I would call it even vitality, right? Like you go to the
Right.
hospital, they take your vital
Right.
signs, right? It's
Right.
like heart beating, how's your your blood oxygen level, pulse oximeter, right? All this. But that's the physical vitality. And this is an energetic vitality, is what I would call
Right.
it. And the other thing I would say is that my starting point almost always is around what I would call self-pleasure. Is it okay to talk about that?
Of course. Yeah.
Okay.
No
People hear
holds barred here.
self-pleasure, and then people think masturbation, which comes along with its own baggage of Catholic shame and guilt. You know,
Right.
sign
Right.
me
Right.
up. I'm born and raised Catholic. Comes along with like, okay, so I should just have an orgasm. No, I would say self-pleasure can be dancing. It can be shaking your body. It can be sitting outside and letting the wind blow on your face, feeling the sun in the morning. It can be including your whole body in touch. It could be putting oil on your skin. There's, I call it the sparkly feeling. And I think any human who's ever had any kind of, you know, even children, I would say, like I know I discovered this feeling as a child. We can feel a sparkly feeling in our genitals. That's what I call it, like sexual turn on
Hmm.
across the board at a baseline level. I call it a sparkly feeling because it's like, I don't know how else to describe that, right? But how do I feel that sparkly feeling everywhere or in more places in my body, right? And then that to me is that vitality. And so
Right.
movement, breath, sound are the keys to activate that. And
Wow.
you could include your genitals in a self-pleasuring in, whatever way you want, but it's less of a centralized focus of like, let me just dial in to my sacral chakra or my anatomy, and more of a, what do I need to do that's pleasurable, enjoyable, doesn't have a, as you said, a quantifiable outcome, right? What can
Right.
I do to awaken that, to have that, you brush your teeth every day, probably, hopefully, most of us do in the morning, right?
Right.
Get up, we have to eat something or drink something, but we forget that this other important ingredient is awakening that vitality, which is our sexual energy, which is our life force energy. And that's where I almost always start is giving a homework assignment to whoever I work with or whatever I teach or anybody who listens to this podcast is like, start to begin your day with something that brings you aliveness, because that will spill over and
Right.
you'll feel different when you're doing your to-do list or sitting at your office job even, or going to the grocery. Yeah.
Wow. So many threads to pick up there.
It's a
Wow.
lot.
Amazing. Well, yeah, I've never really considered it, self-pleasure necessarily, but in my earlier days of awakening, yoga was my go-to. And that's when I really started tapping into my physicality. And I've always been a very physical person, martial arts and running and biking and all these things, right? That this energy was flowing through me, but I never had the awareness to be able to harness it in any other way of it's just like it's coming out. And how is that going to be? It's either going to be anger or it's going to be something. I was luckily able to channel it just intuitively to something more positive, like working out or biking or all these other things, like I'm saying. But once I started doing yoga and really tuning into my inner world, I started intuitively doing like myofascial release.
Mhm.
And I remember just the early days of just rolling the spiky balls on my all over my body and just really feeling like, wow, this is orgasmic. This is full
Mhm.
body orgasmic feeling, you know?
That
And I would
sparkling
just
feeling.
like
Yes.
literally out loud would be like, why doesn't everybody do this? This is so amazing. It feels so good. Like, but I never really thought of it in terms of or framed it in terms of self-pleasure,
Mm.
but that's ultimately what it was. And like you're saying, that spills over into the other areas of your life. And a lot of people in the entrepreneurial space talk about flow, and that's
Mhm.
something that I've focused on through the years. And I think my word for 2022 was flow.
Mhm.
And it's just something that the more that I tap into each individual practice, the more awareness I have around how I am intentionally directing my energy in any given moment, then that does flow to the next task and the next task. And then what you were saying about how do you frame things like, um, somehow a lot of the things that I've come across have been kind of like haphazard, just tripping over different practices and feeling like, well, that seems weird because of my programming, but I'm open. I'm going to dive into it. So, Louise Hay
Mhm.
did something about mirror work. So, like you were saying, when you're brushing your teeth, well, I've done the whole eye gazing in the mirror. It's mind blowing how powerful it can be. And then as I'm brushing my teeth, I write things on the mirror, positive affirmations, different things like that, pretty regularly. And it seems odd. I don't know. Does anybody else do stuff like that? I guess they do.
I
It's
have, yeah, I do,
yeah,
yeah.
right. But
Uh-huh.
it is that kind of practice of dropping into that intentional space where it can flow into those other tasks. I go from brushing my teeth or doing mirror work into the day of looking at that calendar with all those tasks on it and being like, okay, well, I know why I'm here. I know why I'm taking these actions. I have my mission in mind. So this makes sense. And I
Mm,
can pull that energy in rather than looking at that task list and being in that state of sort of I guess retraction
mm,
and not being fully expressed into it, where I know that I have all these opportunities to create things, to make an impact on the world around me, to help others, or whatever all that kind of encompasses. So for me, that's been absolutely my journey. And
mm,
I'm also kind of interested in if you could talk a little bit about, like, you're in the world of coaching this, and you're an entrepreneur as a coach, whereas I'm an entrepreneur doing other, like, whatever business stuff that I do. Yeah, right.
mhm. I know, mine never
Software and
does
marketing and things like that, and I'm using it in that world. So it's kind of, I don't know, how do you personally cross these things over? Is that how you developed the courses that you have, was
it.
by doing it yourself and then just kind of recognizing the importance that this could have in other people's lives? Let me see if I can lower my hand. There we
Um,
go.
yeah. I I wanna I wanna give you a roundabout answer with that, because I think that before we can even go deeper, before I can go deeper into how do I create, right? Your question just in essence is how am I using this
Right.
combination to create, right? And
Absolutely.
before we go into that, I want to present something that I think is essential first. So, and that's about like clearing out and making room and also releasing whatever's in the way of us to create. So it's like if I'm going to
Right.
go in my kitchen and make lunch and I get in there and there's a bunch of dishes all over the stove and like, I can't like get in my fridge because there's like old food in the way and what I want's in the back. Like I have to make space. I got to do the dishes, got to get the old food out of the fridge, right? And then I can make my lunch. I mean, I could try to do it over top of
Right.
this other stuff, but that's ineffective, not going to go well, doesn't feel very good, right? And so something you said about the mirror work brought up my experience in like starting out on this path of realizing I had power to create, right? And very often, once we realize, okay, wait, I'm awake, I'm alive, What do I want to do? The next thing that we hit is all the shit, all of our limiting beliefs, and I would call it like guilt, shame, and fear. That
Right.
that is
The standard emotions and feelings that most people are walking around with or
yeah,
in that
that we
resonance.
come
Yeah.
in many ways that, this pulling again from a Catholic analogy, like this original sin wound, right? Like we're
Right.
born into the world in a context of you're bad and wrong because you're a body, you're dirty because you're a human, and you need to not be a human animal, you need to be a human computer. So you should feel guilty and shameful and have all this stuff going on, right? Because you're bad, because Eve ate the apple, like just to make a silly analogy.
Right.
And and especially that there's something wrong with us because we came from sex. There's this wound, I think, that exists in humanity that there's something innately wrong with us because we came from this shameful act, right? This
Right.
and And there's a lot to unpack there, no matter what your upbringing was, no matter what your religion was, no matter if you had the most amazing hippie parents, right? There's a place to clear out before we can access that power. And it's around, I would say, accepting our bodies, making peace with our physical selves, and then making peace with our emotional selves, and facing those fears of like, what am I afraid of about myself? What am I afraid of about the world? And as we can heal that, as we can come into wholeness of like, okay, I'm a human being. What do I need to do to accept my body? What do I need to do to make peace with myself? Then I would say we also get to this part of the separation, right? We're innately living in a world where we don't remember how to be close. We don't know how to be close with ourselves. We don't know how to
Mm-hmm.
be close with each other. And so I just want to like put a whole bunch of things out there of facing all of that, however it comes up for you, for each person, for me, is so essential. And things like you mentioned, like doing yoga or having some kind of physical practice to help our bodies feel good, right? To get
Mm-hmm.
that phase can be so key. And then to go deeper on the mirror work, actually, I do something with people in person when I can called body presentations, where you get naked and you talk about your body from head to toe and you talk about out loud all the things that you're afraid of. Like one of mine on the first time I did this, I was like, I have these little hairs that grow on my chin. And every time I'm getting ready, I'm like, oh my God, do I have a chin hair? Like, let me go check.
Right.
Right? Like, or, okay, when I was 3, I ran into the screen door. My uncle said, like, you have a stubby nose because you hit the screen door. And I'm always like, are people thinking about my nose? And like that practice you can also do by yourself in the
Right.
mirror. You
Of
can stand
course. Yeah.
naked in front of a mirror and look at yourself. Like most of us adults have actually really never done this. Like
Right.
taken ourselves in and thought about and said out loud, like, wow, yeah, I've every time I look in the mirror, I hate my belly. It's like across the board, men and women, almost everyone says something about their belly. Even
Right.
like people with a six pack will be like, oh, well, I hate my belly button, or like something stupid where you're like, what?
Right.
Like, I would kill
Right.
for that
Right.
body. Like, and so I would say like in my contribution to this podcast, I would invite people to do some work with making peace with your human animal self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
that's great. That's great
and that
advice.
even starting there can open the door to then think about like, oh, well, what would self-pleasure be for me? Right. And
Mm-hmm.
like, how could I be more alive physically? Which then I think could lead to, oh, well, what do I want to actually do for my job? Or for, what kind of relationship do I want? Or how do I start a business? Or how do I come up with new ideas? It's like there's a lot of hurdles. And so I want to presence the body hurdle and the guilt shame.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
I just
Yeah,
want
I love the way you spoke into clearing the path and clearing out old energy. I think that's really, really important when you're looking to bring in something new in your life, for
mm,
sure. And then as far as like the mirror work and the body presence, I guess I haven't really done that specifically or necessarily, but like the Louise Hay, when I'm like looking into my own eyes and my soul, it's on a more soul level than a physical level. But the like again, how powerful that has been, I mean, it's mind blowing. It's really that powerful. And
Mhm.
maybe it's because of where I was at the time when I came across the practice where I was just ready to see my own soul, you know, but it's like when I'm looking into my own eyes in the mirror, it's just wow, like this is a powerful presence. So I think all of that can be really great work. And so to kind of lean into that a little bit as far as like the body presence, the life force energy. When we spoke recently, we talked about Napoleon Hill
Mhm.
and the book Think and Grow Rich. I have my copy right
Yeah.
here. And I told you that time, it was only a few weeks ago when I was in high school. Somehow I came across a cassette tape of the Think and Grow Rich book, and I listened to it over and over and over again. And it just made sense to me, but I could never really put any of it into practice. Like I just didn't have enough of that role model or representation in my outer world where I could catch a thread to follow or a path to follow to really start to anchor that in and to live it in any kind of a way. But all the concepts made complete sense to me. And later on in life, when I got kind of reintroduced to it, chapter 10 in particular is, I think the exact name of chapter 10 is called The Mystery of Sex Transmutation. Now, I
Mhm.
don't remember hearing about this on the cassette tape, but I have heard that in certain versions of Think and Grow Rich, this chapter has actually been edited out or completely revised so that it is less, or so that it's more palatable, I guess. When we think about when this book was written, I think in 1937 or 8, I believe it's coming up on 90-ish years,
Mhm.
85 years ago. I mean, that was a pretty risque title for a chapter of a book back then, The Mystery of Sex Transmutation. But as I got reintroduced to it and as I was evolving in my own practices and my awareness of energy and how I was intentionally expressing into the world, all of this stuff just started to make sense. And it's like, wow, it's the same thing. It's this life force, it's this urge to create. It's like, what is
Mhm.
this energy that is driving me so profoundly to create something in the world that doesn't exist, whether it's an egoic drive or basis or not, because I want to be recognized for my creation or I want someone to acknowledge the work that I've done, or is it just I want to create this piece of art? Because it's the same force for an artist as it is for somebody in business. There's all these things happening, and that's a thread that I'd love to follow with you. Like, how can we dive into that? Do you use this book and these concepts in that chapter in your work and in your coaching? Is that a big part of your coaching, or how does that manifest for you?
I also read that book when I was in, I would call it my probably my plan B life, when I
Right.
had my job as a data analyst and I was starting to realize like, okay, I want to break out of this 9 to 5 traditional life. I was married, I owned a house, I lived in Indiana, and I just started reading everything I could get my hands on about like money and finance and I started my first business when I was 9. I started a dog walking business. I made business cards, and did some, I remember like doing research, asking my neighbors, what would you pay for a dog walk, all this. So I had this entrepreneurial sense, and I remember telling my mom I want to be an inventor. And then somehow I got off on like, oh wait, no, that's not possible. Just do
Right.
life, whatever you're supposed to do. So
Do
then I,
something more conventional. Be stable. Why
yeah,
don't you be stable? How's that? How does that
yeah.
sound?
I got my education. I'm like working this boring, boring ass job. And I'm like, all right, people have done what I want to do. People have started interesting things. Let me read. So I did read Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. That was one of the first books I found. And then I found Napoleon Hill. And I remember really being stumped. I was also similar to you. I was like, what does this even mean? Like, how, like, what do you mean about like the most powerful people in the world are tapped into their sexual energy? Like, what does that even mean? And so eventually, after, some time of seeking and clearing things out, I remember circling back around to this book and being like, oh, I get it now. But it was because I had been able to feel how I could activate myself. I could activate my life force energy, receive ideas, and then see them become real in the world. And how I brought this up to you when we talked. I noticed that the ideas that I came up with, whether it was about my business or where I wanted to travel next, or just even kind of who I wanted to be in the world, that those ideas, when I was alive, when I was activated, when I was turned on and connected to that sexual energy, would be a lot more effective. Like they would
Mm,
actually work. I could actually follow through on the plan. I could actually create a course from that place. And the ideas that I had that just happened, or that, my dad said, oh, well, you should make a course about this because you know about that thing. Like those things just wouldn't work out.
mm-hmm,
It's
mm-hmm.
not, again, quantifiable, but it was really interesting to feel that. And so, what I would say about, like, you asked me, kind of how do I apply this wisdom to my work with people, is that I encourage people to prioritize that stage of connecting to yourself, connecting to your energy,
Right.
activating your life force somehow, right? Dance, move, touch your genitals, whatever you want to do. And then I would say the next important thing is to take time to contemplate and ask yourself, and just be, whether you want to call it meditation or sitting in silence or just being receptive, see what comes up there, see what comes up
Right.
in that place. And that's what I would call is that transmutation. It's, you activate all this energy, so you have your batteries full, and then you allow that energy to transform, to transmute into an idea that you then can create in the world by taking an action, right? Like, okay, I want to start, I don't know, a puppy breeding business. Well, okay, what's an action you can take around that? Oh, I'm going to go call someone who is listed for that on Yelp, right? Or I'm going to go visit a veterinarian, and I'm going to hire someone to make a website. It's like that. We become more effective when we're starting and kind of following that sequence. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I would say I do with people, is I help them be accountable to doing that activation process. And then I really work with them to take time, and for a lot of us too, um, it's not as natural to do that alone, to get those ideas alone, right? It can be through conversation
Right.
also, like contemplative conversation, right? Or even just being asked, like, as a coach, most of the time I'm just asking people, what do you want? What are you interested in? Why would you
Right.
like that? What would that feel like? Right. And so that's how I action that process of this mysterious sexual transmutation. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting to frame it that way because like having a guide would be, and I had guides along the way in different ways, but I didn't ever like, you know, outwardly seek someone to guide me in this way. It's like the student was ready and the teacher appeared type of thing.
Mm.
But a lot of the things that kind of happened to me are these practices that I tripped over or fell into, and it just kind of like made sense. It was also kind of um, it was uh, it was kind of untethering,
Mm. Mm.
ungrounding to be like, oh my gosh, I'm judging myself. I have all these things, these voices of the past and projections of the past coming in, and I'm judging myself about them along the way. So it's taking me longer to get into that transmutative state where it's actually working in my favor rather than just throwing me off track of where being ungrounded in that space, you know? So I think
Mm-hmm.
like Napoleon Hill in this chapter, he's really relating that life force energy in the same way that some of the ancient traditions that I know you've studied far more than I have kind of the seed of that creativity and the ability to express the energy that's driven by the sexual urge. It's literally the urge to create life. It's overwhelmingly powerful. It's the urge brings up so many different emotions from joy and pleasure to suffering at the greatest steps, conflict with others. But it's just ultimately life force energy seeking an expression in the world. And as we become more aware of it, at least in my experience, then we can start to notice those things, like you're saying, have that kind of awareness of it, and then the redirection of it. In Napoleon's words, was the redirection of the energy into that more creative expression that is not just physically and sexually based, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can I riff on a couple things that
Absolutely. Let's riff.
yeah, I want to talk about how things are hidden and like hidden in plain sight. And then I lost the other one, so I'll just start there. But yeah, I love that this book is so popular in so many spheres, right? Especially in
Hmm.
like the business world. Because and I love that it has this information in it. And this is not a idea that's at all, I would say it's everywhere. Once you start to realize, okay, this is an important ingredient, my sexual energy and life, like it's everywhere and all across the board. Like life itself, even breathing is sex. One of my teachers says it's like
Mm,
breathing
right,
and you're giving, right? It's like this sunlight in a plant is sex, right? It's like when you can break down this idea of like sex is a thing that you do with someone in a room somewhere to
right, right.
wait a minute, life, like the process of life happening is also sex. It's
Correct. Yeah.
it just takes away some layer that it's like a film gets cleared and um and I would say it's not an accident and it's not to make these books more palatable, right? That this information is not being like taught in kindergarten, right? It's like imagine in school that you're told like do what you need to do to feel good and follow what you're interested in. Like what kind of world would we live in,
Right,
right? It's
right.
like it's not a coincidence that that's not how the world is set up because our power also lies in this knowledge and this awareness. And when when we do tap into this ability to create, we are less reliant on having a 9 to 5 job. We are less reliant on systematized medical care. We are less reliant on the grocery store. It's like people want to plant a garden, right? And our westernized culture, in my view, is so disconnected from what's natural because this more artificial way of living that's gotten popularized in especially in America, but has been perceived as like the thing, right? The American dream, have a
Hmm.
house, happy family, white picket fence, lots of money, right? That is actually so disconnected from what's natural for a lot of us, right? Which is being together, living with people around us, going slow in life, sitting
Hmm.
outside and enjoying the day, right? Like that's natural. Those are all natural human desires. And this, I would say, lie that we've been sold about what would be happiness, uh, it actually is reliant on us not being in our power to a large extent
Right, right.
and relying on other systems, something outside ourselves, right? Relying on your job, relying on your landlord, relying on whatever it is, right? It's like once we start to remember this power, it in many ways I see people unplugging, right?
Hmm.
Unplugging from these systems. And so again, I'm going a little deep and left field here, and not to say that if you want the white picket fence life, like that may be your true heart's desire and like go for it, right? But I think most of us have a natural expression like a plant. Like I would say this plant right here, right? Nobody told it what it needs to look like, and it's not trying to look like any other plant. It's unique,
Hmm.
it's itself, and it's just growing. It's just doing,
Right.
right? If I try to turn this into a rose, impossible, right? Like, can't do it. And I think that each of us is like a unique plant, and what we need to be happy and healthy is specific and in our heart, like it's inside. We know it inside. Nobody can tell us from the outside. So,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think it's more of it's those dualities in life. Like you said, it's hidden in plain sight. It's right in front of us. It's like we have this kind of cultural dynamic where sex sells. We know that sex sells, but us having this conversation might be edgy for some people. Maybe for a lot of people. I don't know. But at the same time, as sex being so sellable and so prominently in our face in that commercial realm, we're
Mhm.
probably still ultimately one of the most sexually repressed societies, in existence at the same time. It's crazy to think about it that way, but that's the truth. And us being motivated by so many different things in life, if you think about like Maslow's pyramid, and we need food, we need shelter, we need community and connection and all these things, sex is at the top of the list, right? Like that's a primary driver in our expression into the world. And it's just it's crazy when you start to dissect these things. And I think it takes that level of personal development that
Mhm.
creates the awareness of these things, so then you can start to really take a step back and see these things for what they are, and see these energies as being more universal and not just as a means to have a physical sexual expression. But as you said before, these energies are prevalent in every area of our life, from the birds singing and the plants planting, and all of the things that are true for us personally as well, in the ways that our energies express into the world. It's all that core of life force energy that's coming through us.
Mhm.
So I don't know. It's a different way to view life. It has been a different way to view life for me, and it's allowed me to express in my professional life in a way that I never thought possible. Whereas
Mhm.
before, I was just always reactive, performative, um, task oriented. To some degree, I still am task oriented because I have shit to do, but at the same time, it's a different way of looking and being with
Mhm.
it, so that I'm bringing the joy into it and anchoring more into the gratitude that I have because I'm here with the ability to do that. I'm not at these lower realms of Maslow's pyramid where I'm worried about food or shelter, things that half the world are struggling for every day.
Mhm.
Then that allows me to express at higher levels up the pyramid. And wow, how much more grateful can I be for life when I'm playing at those levels?
Mhm.
And you know what I mean? There's just so much here. It's like it's so
Yeah,
overwhelming.
I got something.
Go for it.
Yeah, it is important to presence, for lack of a better word, the privilege of
Right. The
life,
privilege. Yeah.
right? Like life's okay. Life's cruising, right? Like I got food in my fridge, I have a place to live, as you said. Like that's not something to actually take for granted, right? That's
Absolutely.
very grateful for. And the questions that we're asking, right? Of like, how can my life feel good? How can it be better than this? How can I bring something into the world? In many ways, it is a privilege to be pondering that. And I would also say it's natural. Like if you think about a tree in your yard, it's not worrying about is it going to survive or not. It's just alive, right? It's just there until it's not, till it runs out of water or gets too old or somebody cuts it down. you know? And I would say that something I've felt in life is that life wants to support life. Like
Hmm.
there is an inherent something of like, why are babies so resilient, right? Why does our bones repair themselves when they get broken, right? Like life wants to keep life going.
Hmm.
And once I started to believe that, like to develop a fundamental trust that actually I live in a world that wants me to enjoy my life, that wants me to thrive, just because it's nature. That's what is happening in nature.
Right.
And I'm like, huh, is that actually true for me too, as a human being? Can I trust that? There's like a bit of a safety net, I think, that comes along with that. And
I love that.
it's not like, hooray, life is gonna support me, so let's go spend 100 grand on my credit card. Like, no, that's also, that's not what I'm saying.
Right.
It's not
Right.
like,
Right.
well, let's be frivolous and crazy because I'm indestructible. It's not that. It's like, okay, if I'm following my heart, if I'm actually here to create, like why else do we exist, right? This question of going real deep here for a second, but like, what is the purpose of life? Like,
Hmm.
why do I even exist? Why are we here? What is this thing? What am I doing? Right? This feeling of, and this, age old biblical, we're made in the image of the creator, right? We're made in the image of God, which made the
Hmm.
whole world, right? For what? My favorite, one of my favorite books is called Conversations with God, and
Yeah,
this
I've heard of
man
that one. I haven't
is
dove into it, but I've heard of it.
Neil Donald Walsh.
Right.
He's somehow actually experiencing that he's talking to God, and he wrote everything by asking a question and waiting for an answer, right? And the answer that he heard and that I've also felt myself in different ways is like, we're here because if we were pure existence, that would be really fucking boring.
Right. Right.
Pure existence can't look in someone's eyes. Pure existence can't say, wow, smell this flower. Isn't it so cool? Right?
Yeah.
Pure
There's no
existence,
contrast, right? There's no
and it can't
contrast between the
create.
energy, right?
You can't create, there's nothing, creation is missing, right? You
Right.
need things to interact with to create. So, yeah, I would say just, this baseline of like, we are here to create. And
Hmm.
life wants us to do that and wants to support us. Like, if you can, in your heart, in your own way, find some evidence of that, I would say that that can really bring a beautiful empowerment to whatever you want to do. Yeah.
Right. Are you ultimately saying that the universe has your back?
That's a
Because
good way.
that's what I'm hearing.
That's one of your
Because
phrases.
that's what it was for me when my whole
Yeah.
life fell apart. I was like, okay, universe, please, like help me out here. And like you said, life is supporting life. Life is showing up to support life. The other thought that came up there was like in even like with my son and teaching him how to show up in the world or how the possibilities of how you do show up in the world. It's like the more you give, the more
Mhm.
outwardly expressed that you are, the more magnetic you're going to be, right?
Mhm.
Well, what does that mean? That means that you're expressing that life force energy in a way that other people can see and uh, find a reference point to, and it becomes more tangible, and that's attractive, it's magnetic, and
Mhm.
that's what pulls the other things towards you, that
Mhm.
you're, in Napoleon's words, your definite chief aim,
Mhm.
that pulls those people together, pulls the resources together, pulls the ideas together in any given moment so that those things can be made manifest in the world. And I think that's what I kind of heard through what you were saying is happening.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, I love referencing books on things like this because it was so helpful. I listened to so many podcasts when I started my journey and then just wrote everything down and went and read it and come back. And
Hmm.
there's a book called A Course in Miracles. You've
Yeah,
heard of
I
that?
am. Yeah, that's a big one.
And
ACM.
there's a fundamental idea in there that there is no difference between giving and receiving. Giving and receiving are actually one and the same. And the way that I think about that is that it's like an aperture on a camera. And it's
Mm,
like, how much light are we letting in? How much light, how much life am I letting
right.
in? Right? And if I'm giving this much, right, I can also only receive this much. But if I start to also give more, right, then I can also receive more. And that question, the question of I would ask, how can I serve, or even just more simply, like, what am I supposed to do today? Like, what am I
Mm,
actually supposed to do today? And how can I do that for the good of all? Like, how can I serve the
right.
world? And the world today might just be my baby, like, the answer might just be like, hang out with your daughter, right?
Right.
Or it might be like, show up on a podcast, or it might be like, go, give all the extra frozen food in your fridge to the homeless people on the corner, or call your friend and ask them to start a business. But there's something about, like, we I think we first have to give. Like, we have to first put something out there, right? Whether it's
Yeah,
a smile
absolutely.
to a stranger, a $10 bill to the homeless person, a phone call to someone you love. Like, when we start to think about, what can I do to serve? How can I give? It opens that aperture. And then naturally, because it's the same, that direction doesn't actually matter which way it's going, right?
Hmm.
But we have the path. I can't exactly influence my ability to receive. I can't just be like, okay, world, come on, give me
Right.
$1 million. Let's go,
Right.
right? But I can slowly expand what I'm doing and how I'm being, and life starts to bring more back in. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think like we were saying with the contrast in the world, like if we are just source energy, there's nothing. We're pure love. We're just a ball of love. There's nothing
Mhm.
happening there.
Mhm.
It's not, there's no catalyst for transformation, growth, or even finding the edges of anything, whether it be framed as positive or negative. And I think you threw a quote in there, but one of the ones from that I love from Alan Watts is that if you're gonna walk if we're gonna walk on the ground, we can't dangle our legs in the air, right? We have to have some kind of barrier boundary to
Mhm.
push up against so that we can have it push back. And this is breath, right? This is the universe going like this. This is the
Mhm.
torus field, right?
Yeah,
That's for
that's what
another
I was
podcast,
seeing.
I guess, but
Yeah, that's what I was seeing.
but
Yeah.
that's what it is, and it's like that stuff is just amazing to come to that kind of recognition. And then like you're saying with the aperture, you've done work in the similar way that I have. You did landmark and I did ascension leadership, but and this is recent for me to come to the realization that I've been stingy with my energy, and that is kind of like translated into my aperture was too small. It's like I was very internal, very, very recently, even less than a year ago, I was very internal, even in my practice, and kind of feeling that, well, I'm just here doing my work, and that energy and that frequency will radiate out into the world on its own, and the butterfly's wings will have some effect at some point on somebody, and it doesn't matter to me. But my mentors in that program taught me that, well, why don't you just go out and be as big as you can right now? Start flapping around all over the place. I'm like, huh, I never really thought about it that way. It's way more comfortable to be here in my own space, but that comfort level is a comfort zone.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to be able to create the catalyst for the level of growth that I want to experience in my life, that I believe I'm ultimately here for, the level of evolution that I'm striving for with my own life force energy and the sexual energy that we're talking about. I'm
Mhm.
not going to be able to maximize that by being internal and not going out and being courageous and outrageous, and how open my aperture is, in your words.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, I say one last thing, and then it's probably a good time for me to wrap up and go check on the little one.
Sure.
Um, I often ask something at the end of my podcast too, and I'm like, is there something you want people to really hear? And I didn't plan this. I was just got this, my answer to my own question while you were sharing. Um, and what I would say is that if there was something I could really have people hear on this that would make any real impact beyond anything else we've said, it's that you matter, and whatever you are excited about and want to bring into the world is what the world needs. Like, we need you, you matter, and you're the only one that can do that, and you can't do it alone. It's
I
like,
love it.
you're the only one, but you can't do it alone.
Your unique expression is needed. That's ultimately what the way
Yeah,
the universe is
just
set
got
up.
chills.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And
yeah.
in the beginning, when we started, I introduced you. I didn't mention that I've done multiple had multiple experiences with you in a leadership role. You're a community leader. Ultimately, you lead experiences for different communities around the Austin area, and I'm sure beyond. I know that you travel some and do that as well. But in my experience of you of just organizing community around these types of concepts, the types of concepts that you teach, the healing modalities that you are bringing into the world, and things like that. Like, my experience of that has been magical, and that's one of the things that attracts me to you, and that made me want to have this conversation with you. And now that we've had this conversation, it's like, wow, there's so many more conversations we could have. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy mother schedule, and just there's so many other things that you could prioritize for yourself and the people who you're already working with, to come on and talk to me in a little bit more depth about some of these concepts, and to expose the people who listen to this podcast to the work that you do and the possibilities of that anyone has, that's coming from an embodied place and a place of real, I think, craving for self-development. It's like, these concepts are not new. Napoleon Hill was talking about them 90 years ago, and he probably read them in other books that were potentially hundreds or thousands of years old. But here we are, relearning in real time as a species. Like, these are things that are anchored in ancient teachings, back to Egypt and beyond, I'm sure. So it's just fascinating to dive into these things that seem so um, inaccessible at times.
Mhm,
But as we said before, they're right there in front of us.
mhm,
They're there for the learning.
mhm.
They're there for the application. And they're there for us to be able to maximize our expression in the world. So maybe we can leave it at that. You have
I
any other thoughts?
I do believe that we're going somewhere, all of us.
Yes, we are.
I really believe that if we look at, where we've been, it's kind of like we took a wrong turn somewhere and we're starting to get back on track as a species, as a humanity. I don't buy
Hmm.
into this dreadful doomsday
The
anything.
doomsday, yeah.
No,
Right.
I really believe we're going somewhere. And the last seed I want to leave here is Haydn Temple in New Zealand. One of my teachers there, Bruce Lyon, has a lot of information about where we're going that really resonates with me, and helps put all this in perspective, helps put a lot of the struggle that we've felt in our own lives and in the recent past of humanity, several hundred years, in perspective. And this year into the end of 2025 is really predicted to be a hopeful, positive, transformational, like radical time. He says it's a train that's already taken off from the station and you still got
Yes.
time to jump on, but if you're not on, it's gonna be too late. So yeah,
Right.
thank you for jumping on this train, and for anyone who's, kind of sitting on their heels like, when is it gonna be time to go to that class or read that book? Or it's like, it's now. It's
Yeah,
this
good.
season.
Now's maybe a good time.
We're
Yeah.
going somewhere good. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I'll link that up in the description. And one more step, like, how can people reach you? What's the best way to contact you? I know, like, I follow you on Instagram.
That's the
I know
best
that
way.
you're active on Instagram. Is that the
Yeah.
best way? I can link that up as well. And
Yep.
anything else, I'll link your website. Any other
No,
contact
Instagram,
info?
I tend to post everything I'm doing on there, especially my stories for upcoming classes, live workshops in person, and so that's the best place. And it's Liv Liv Love Tantra. I have it on my I don't know if it'll show up in the recording, but I have it in my name here too. On
Okay, fantastic.
yeah,
Yeah, I'll make sure that that gets in the description. Liv, thank you so much. I
you
really enjoyed this conversation. I can't wait to talk to you again, and I'm wishing you all of the best with you and your daughter and beyond. I love you so much.
too. Thank you.